Our story takes place in the bitter cold of January, the height of winter. The world was shrouded in a dense, wintry silence outside, but my mind was anything but idle. My son Ethan, a talented artist who had just turned 19, was engrossed in a world of paintings and sketches that depicted human figures with amazing movement and emotion. His retreat was his studio, an area of our house that he had claimed. His passion and dedication were evident in the tumultuous sanctuary of canvases, jars filled with brushes and paint streaks. That morning, wrapped in a heavy robe to protect myself from the constant chill that infiltrated our kitchen. During the winter, I sat with a steaming cup of coffee. The previous evening, Ethan had remained up late, and I hadn't had the courage to wake him up. I was deep in thought as I stared out the frost-covered window when I heard the stairs creak a sound I was accustomed to. "Good morning, Mother." Ethan gave a cordial greeting in a steady, deep voice. He held a cup of tea in one arm and a canvas in the other. His eyes gleamed with inspiration, but his hair was disheveled and his face still had signs of sleep. As he gently leaned the canvas against the counter, I said, "Good morning, sweetheart." His enthusiasm, which was lively even in the dead of winter, caused a smile to appear on my face. "Last night? Did you get any sleep?" I inquired. A sheepish smile played at the corners of his lips as he shrugged. "I was actually working on something." "Do you want to see?" I nodded, intrigued. He turned the canvas toward me and revealed a painting that briefly made me gasp because it was so raw and vibrant. A figure in soft light with a posture that combined strength and vulnerability was the subject of the study. The piece's depth and intimacy were incredible, well beyond his years. "It's amazing, Ethan," I whispered earnestly. "You possess a unique gift." He looked away, obviously embarrassed by the compliment, and his cheeks flushed. "Regards, Mom." "Without your help, I couldn't have succeeded," he acknowledged. We shared a silent understanding that was profoundly felt but unsaid. Despite being a good man, my husband was frequently away from us due to work or hobbies. His absence lingered in my life in silence, but I had eventually come to terms with it. Curiosity overcame me later that day, and I stopped by Ethan's studio to take a look. Ethan's brush moved with fluid precision as he stood in front of another canvas. His concentration seemed to hum through the air. He gave me a quiet smile when he saw me. I was caught, gently. He teased, curious about what I'm working on right now. Attracted, I entered the room. The air smelled of paint and turpentine, and his work area was bathed in a golden glow from the winter sunlight coming in through the window. He moved aside to display his creation, a study of hands with their complex postures, conveying emotion and expression. As I marveled at the detail, I re-Ethaned, "They're beautiful." He turned to face me and spoke, his eyes unwavering. "I've been considering creating a series that uses the human form to explore various emotions." "That sounds fantastic," I said, truly impressed. "You always seem to see things that others might not." For a brief moment, something unsaid moved between us as his face softened. I had experienced it previously, a subtle connection that went beyond the typical parent-child dynamic. It brought to mind how much we relied on one another, particularly when his father wasn't around. The winter days passed, interspersed with our shared warmth in the midst of the cold and Ethan's growing portfolio. But as we got closer, I couldn't help but think about the lines we set in our relationships, and the places where admiration and love subtly merged. It could not be denied. Ethan was more than simply my son. He was an extraordinary young man who filled the voids in my life. It was quiet and still that night, the kind of January night when darkness and snow silence the world. My husband had gone bowling with friends, as he usually did, a hobby that frequently left Ethan and me alone in a home that felt more comfortable without him. That day, Ethan had paid particular attention, making brief but considerate reasons as we went about our daily business. "You're aware of your personality, Mom." I was standing in the kitchen making dinner when he said that earlier. I smiled curiously as I turned to face him, which way his lips curled into his trade-Ethan easy grin as he leaned casually against the doorway. "The way you bring a sense of home to any place." You know, he said it's rare. And I laughed quietly, dismissing his re-Ethans as a son's light-hearted compliment. But they warmed me inside. The words weren't the only thing I felt like I was really understood because of the soft, sincere tone. Later that night, Ethan came out of his studio with a box while I was sitting by the fire looking through a magazine. His grin was almost childlike, and his dark eyes glistened with excitement. He put the box on the coffee table in front of me and said, "Mom, I have an idea." "What is this?" Intrigued, I asked. With his hands in his pockets, he stepped back and urged her to open it. When I opened the lid, I saw a stunning red satin robe that glistened in the gentle light like liquid fire. I gasped. "What's this for Ethan?" Despite his serious expression, he shrugged. "I've been considering beginning a new series of portraits that are personal rather than aloof or cold. I wish to convey coziness, Grace, and while let me paint you, please." My heart was racing at the prospect of being his subject. As I gazed at the robe, I was both excited and unnerved by the thought. "Would you like me to don this?" His tone was earnest as he nodded. "You would look amazing in it, of course. Only for the portrait." I hesitated for a second before agreeing. His request had an allure that was impossible to resist, the way his face lit up with passion. "Okay," I whispered. "Let's get started." His joy was infectious and his smile grew. "Okay, I'll set everything up while you put it on." My hands trembled a little as I slipped into the robe and carried the box upstairs. The satin draped gently over my body and felt cool against my skin. It was unquestionably lovely, and I felt a sudden surge of confidence as I gazed at myself in the mirror. Ethan had changed the living room by the time I got back. In the middle, lit by the fire's flickering glow, was a chair covered with a cozy wool blanket. His easel stood close by a blank canvas, waiting to be painted with his idea. "You look beautiful," he said in a low, appreciative voice. After a moment of staring, he shook his head and pointed to the chair. "Take a seat here and unwind." My nerves were calmed by the blanket's texture as I sank into the chair. Ethan looked from me to the canvas and started painting his brush, moving with confident practice strokes. At one point, he teased, "Hold still. You don't find it difficult. You're naturally graceful." I shook my head and chuckled quietly. "Ethan, you're too much." He met my eyes and insisted, "No, really." "Mom, you're stunning. I only hope you are adequately depicted in this painting." His re-Ethans caused a deep-seated mixture of pride and vulnerability in me that I wasn't yet ready to face head-on. I kept quiet, allowing the sound of his brush and the crackle of the fire to fill the void between us. The mood changed as the evening went on. A quiet but deep intimacy that transcended spoken language grew. I was drawn to Ethan's warmth as his taunting became softer and his compliments more intimate. "Do you remember when I was younger and used to draw you with crayons?" he asked abruptly. Stopping in the middle of his sentence, "No matter how awful they were, you always kept them." The recollection made me smile. "They weren't awful." He laughed, his eyes gentle. "They were precious because they came from you. Not just for artwork, but for everything. You have always been my favorite subject." His words weighed heavily, and I noticed that my cheeks were flushed. His voice had a depth that gave me a sense of recognition and worth that I hadn't experienced in years. When he was done, he took a step back and looked critically at the canvas. "Done." He declared, his voice full of pride. I went to the painting on the other side of the room. It was amazing. A picture of me with the satin robe draped tastefully over my shoulders, drenched in the warm glow of the fire. I was impressed by more than just the technical proficiency, though. Something deeper, an essence I was unaware I possessed, had been captured by him. I said, my voice full of emotion, "It's beautiful." "Thank you." Ethan turned to face me with a serious expression. "I appreciate everything you've done." As I lay in bed that night, I kept thinking about the painting and Ethan's gaze on me. Although we had always had a close relationship, it seemed like something was evolving, growing deeper and more complex. In addition to being unnerving, it was incredibly reassuring. As I woke up, the golden glow of the soft morning light filtered through the curtains. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee reached me before I could collect my thoughts. When I opened my eyes, Ethan was standing by my bedside, grinning teasingly. He had a steaming mug in one hand and a single daisy in the other, a sweet and simple morning muse. His tone was affectionate as he teased, "I felt that today you merited a little more pampering." Even though I was still half asleep, I smiled because I was impressed by his consideration. I sat up and whispered, "You're spoiling me," while he set the coffee on the nightstand. "That's the idea," he said, offering me the flower while seated at the edge of the bed. As he examined me, his face softened and his eyes lingered in a way that made my heart skip a beat. "Mom, you have inspired me. Never in my life have I felt so connected." His honesty broke through my usual composure, leaving me speechless when he spoke to my work or to someone. He took my hand and kissed it tenderly before I could reply. "There's more to come," he said in a light-hearted tone once more. "I have a surprise for you tonight, but you must keep the door to the studio closed. If Dad notices, let's just say that he wouldn't, understand his words, cause my heart rate to increase with anxiety and excitement blending in my chest." "What sort of surprise?" My voice was softer than I meant when I asked. Ethan stood up and laughed. "You'll see. I have a few things to get first, but you'll love it, I promise." He then departed, leaving me with the coffee, the daisy, and a flurry of feelings I wasn't quite ready to deal with. I kept repeating his words, his gestures, and the way he had gazed at me throughout the day. I experienced conflict along with giddiness like I was a teenager with a crush. Ethan was no ordinary person. He was my son. But I felt like a woman again because of the way he saw me and treated me, not merely a wife or mother. My excitement only increased as the evening wore on. I made dinner, poured 2 glasses of wine, and tried not to think too much about what might happen that night in order to keep myself occupied. My heart was racing by the time I arrived at Ethan's studio. I pushed the door open, and it creaked. And there he was, encircled by the well-known tangle of paint and canvases. He appeared different, though more confident and self-assured. A tiny red box, its bright color gleaming in the light, was in his hands. "I've been anticipating your arrival." His voice was inviting and low as he spoke. "Enter." He gestured to a chair in the middle of the room and I entered, closing the door behind me. With the subtle hum of music in the background and the subtle smell of paint still permeating the air, the scene was cozy. As he handed me the box, I became more interested. His eyes were bright with anticipation as he urged them to open it. I opened the lid with shaking fingers and saw a sleek leather outfit, black lingerie, a pair of cat ears, and even a tiny tail. Unsure of how to react, I looked up at him. My cheeks flushed. He said, simply and earnestly, "You're my muse. I want to portray you in a brave, fearless, and unapologetic manner, feeling the weight of the situation." I hesitated, but it was impossible to say no to his unflinching confidence and admiration. I took the box, nodded slowly, and moved back behind a screen he had erected in the corner. The leather stuck to my skin as I undressed, making me feel vulnerable and strong. When I eventually came out, Ethan's response was instantaneous. After his eyes widened a little, a slow smile appeared on his face. "You're perfect," he said quietly, motioning me to take a seat again. "Perfect, perfect, perfect." With the accuracy of someone in their element, he manipulated his easel, the music, and the lighting. Then he started sketching, moving with purpose and concentration. Except for the faint scratch of charcoal on paper and Ethan's sporadic mutter of approval, the room was silent. I observed him working his hands steady and assured his brow furrowed in concentration. He studied every curve and shadow of me, as though I were the most fascinating subject he had ever seen, and there was something deeply personal about the way he looked at me. The boundaries between us appeared to become increasingly hazy as the hours went by. Ethan became bolder in his compliments and softer and more loving in his teasing. Even though I knew we were going too far, I couldn't bring myself to stop him, or the emotions that are arising inside of me. The bond between us felt indisputable when he eventually put down his tools. He took a step toward me, looked into my eyes, and spoke in a voice that was hardly more than a whisper. "I'm grateful that you trusted me and allowed me to see you." He said I was overcome with emotion, but I was at a loss for words. Rather, I extended my arm to grasp his hand and held it firmly. Although neither of us fully understood it, we were unable to ignore the moment's delicate yet powerful feel. I relived every word, every glance, every detail as I lay in bed that night. Something had changed between us, deepened in ways I couldn't quite put my finger on. Even though I had no idea where this would go, I couldn't get rid of the sensation that I was entering something unique and completely unknown. My phone buzzed softly on the nightstand, interrupting my thoughts. I saw a message from Ethan as I reached for it. "Come to me sleeping is impossible for me." As I read the words, their meaning packed into their simplicity, my breath caught. As I considered my options, my heart raced. But before I could stop myself, I was being carried by my feet toward his studio down the hallway. Except for the gentle creak of the wooden floors beneath my feet, the house was quiet. Ethan was sitting on the edge of the couch with his hands clasped nervously in his lap when I opened the door. As I walked in, he looked up, his eyes searching mine with a mixture of vulnerability and hope. "Mom." His voice was hardly audible as he started. "Do you also feel it?" "I must know. How do I?" I was momentarily unable to breathe as his words lingered in the air. I couldn't lie to him because I knew what he was asking, even though I had tried to hide it from myself. Not with such unvarnished honesty in his eyes. "Yes," I said quietly, my voice shaking. "Yes, I do." His face lit up with relief, and he got up, taking short steps to get closer to me. His voice was full of emotion as he whispered, "You were always more than just my mom. To me, you were everything." As his arms encircled me and pulled me into an embrace that made me feel as though the world had vanished and there was only the two of us, I closed my eyes, stunned by the intensity of the moment. He paused, then drew back a little, his hands on my shoulders. "I have an idea," he said, his tone lightening and becoming more playful. "Let's do something special for ourselves while Dad is sleeping." "What are you saying?" My curiosity sparked me to ask. With mischievous gleams in his eyes, he responded, "Paint therapy. It's about using color and touch to convey emotion. This is something I've wanted to try for a very long time, and I can't see doing it with anyone else but you." I was surprised by the suggestion, but I couldn't help but accept it because of the earnestness in his voice. "All right," I said, my lips twitching into a nervous smile. Show Me Ethan's face brightened with anticipation, and he started assembling supplies right away. A big roll of canvas bottles of colorful paint and floor-covering towels. With infectious enthusiasm, he described the procedure as he worked. He put the canvas in the middle of the room and said, "You just let go. Just emotion, no hesitation, no rules." He poured the paint straight onto the canvas, creating captivating patterns with the vivid red, blue, and gold streaks swirling together. Then he turned and held out his hand to me. "Should we?" But it changed into something deeper as the evening grew darker. Ethan traced complex patterns on my skin with his hands moving slowly and purposefully. His eyes met mine, and he whispered, "All of you." My cheeks flushed, but I leaned into his touch and let the moment play out rather than pulling away. I watched the paint shimmer against his skin as I reached out and drew a golden line along his collarbone. The flicker of candlelight, the gentle hum of music, and the warmth of our relationship filled the room. Every time he touched me and we looked at each other, the lines between us seemed to dissolve. 1.2s. We lay side by side on the canvas at the end of the session, our bodies covered in vivid color swirls. Ethan turned his face tenderly toward me. He said simply, "Thank you for being here, for trusting me." 1.6. With a full heart, I grinned. There is no other place I would rather be. I went back to my room and lay in bed that night, replaying every moment in my head. Ethan was more than simply my son. He was a man powerful, fervent, and lively. I couldn't dispute the strength of our relationship, even though the route we had taken was unorthodox.